Wow, what an interesting segment we had earlier on modern dating and mental well being. We are going to shift gears a little bit now, and I'm excited to share with everyone our next guest. So let me just pull out the slides. Now, the topic for our next conversation is Beyond Diagnosis, Your Difference is Your Strength. And our guest is our nation's pride and darling. I'll introduce her a bit more later. Throughout this session, do drop your comments, questions in the panel on your right. We will try to leave some time for Q&A later. Now, what inspired today's session? Really, it's about asking this nation's pride and darling, how does one block out a whole country's expectations and trust her inner voice? I think all of us are, quite familiar with expectations, but a country's expectations on you, that must be heavy. So our guest today had first-hand experience with this topic. She's three-time Olympian and national swimmer, Quah Ting Wen, and she will share with us how to keep her head above water under pressure. Now, a little bit about Ting Wen, although I highly doubt she's a stranger to any of us. Quah Ting Wen is a Singaporean national sports icon and swimmer. In the 2009 Asian Youth Games, she won 4 gold medals and set 3 national records in her individual events. She's a three-time Olympian, and she has been to multiple world championships. She has participated in several competitions such as the Southeast Asian Games, Asian Games, the Commonwealth Games. Wow, that's really a mouthful, Ting Wen, and congratulations on all those achievements thus far. Thank you for choosing to join us today and allowing us to have a glimpse of the Ting Wen behind all these achievements. We have compiled some questions. Some of them I've read through, might be a little bit difficult, but I think it will help our audience who probably are going through a similar episode. But of course, anytime, feel free to let me know if they become too uncomfortable for you. We can certainly move on from those questions. Okay?
All right.
So, Ting Wen, welcome.
Hi, Cassandra. Thank you so much. And thank you, Intellect, for having me today. And thank you for
Yeah.
the introduction.
No, we are very excited. I was personally very excited when I knew I was going to be moderating this session. So let's go back down memory lane a little bit. So you have been swimming since you were about 11. So can you share with us how this journey kind of evolved from 11 to now? How has that whole journey of swimming evolved?
A lot of people ask if, my parents are swimmers or if, I had been put into the sport with the intention of representing the country or swimming to the level that I am at right now. I think a lot of it started for me very innocently. I am the oldest of 3 children by 4 years. So for 4 years, I was by myself, and my parents would try to have me outdoors as much as possible. I would be
Mm-hmm.
at the pool a lot on the weekends just playing. And so it started out with water safety courses, just making sure I was water safe, able to float. And it was just a progressive thing. As a child, I didn't really say no to a lot of things. So then when my parents asked if I would like to learn the 4 strokes, I was quite open to it. I think the developmental coaches at the pool had seen that I was quite comfortable in the water, and so introduced the idea to my parents. And from there, it's kind of just it trickled down to my brother and my sister also. So we all swim for Singapore
Yeah.
right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've gone through, like I think I've pretty much gone through every stage of swimming that you can go through.
Yeah.
Learn to swim, developmental like stroke and technique, and then junior to sort of mid ranking, and then senior. And I think I'm the oldest right now on the national team. I have been for I think the last 2 or 3 years, um, and I think I've come into my role as a senior athlete, and also sort of transitioning into like a mentor to some of the younger ones quite
Mhm.
nicely. And I'm quite enjoying that.
That is so important, right? I think to be a mentor to those who are just joining this whole journey. I think no better person than somebody who has gone through all those stages and knowing exactly the kind of pressure that they may be facing as well. So I am an amateur sports player, right? So I played on like school teams and whatnot, and I recall feeling the pressure when the games were on. And obviously, those were school games. They weren't life and death to my parents. They wouldn't understand the kind of stress, but I'm sure you can. Can you shed light as to what kind of mental health challenges a national athlete like yourself face that most of us cannot even begin to fathom?
I think, okay, first, when you talk to anyone, sports person or not, or whatever level of an athlete you are, everyone I think has faced some situation in their lives where they felt pressured or stressed. And I think if you take a step back and ask yourself why you feel those things, I think a lot of the times people will tell you it's because they are worried about the outcome. They are worried
Yeah,
about failure. They want to succeed. They are then worried about the flip side of that, which is not succeeding. And I think um, then that's where that fear comes from. And with that fear comes like that stress to then not fail. And I
yeah,
think then if you take another step back, you ask yourself, why do you care so much about not failing? And then most of the time people say, it's, well, because I care about um, whatever they're pursuing. So I think then if you kind of put that and look at the athletes and try and imagine like how they feel, first of all, you're right, it's not life or death. It is something that all of us chose to do at whatever level that we're doing it at. And sometimes it's like it's hard to comprehend, like, oh, if it's not life or death, then why feel all that stress, why feel so much pressure? I think it boils down to the fact that we just care a lot, and we put a lot of pressure not on ourselves to do well, not just to do ourselves proud, but I think then there's an added element of like doing our teammates proud if you're on a relay or in a team sport, doing your family and friends proud. Then on top of that, it's like doing the whole nation proud. And there's, I think, the expectation at bigger games, you there's always like the medal tally at the end, and there's that expectation of everyone that we are going there to represent the country and the flag. And so there's
yeah,
that desire to do well, not fail. And I think that's when the pressure comes in.
yeah,
I think then it gets a little bit more difficult also sometimes when people's perception of athletes, we are physically strong, and then I think that perception of us being strong kind of oozes over to that mental strength. And so then
mm,
us as athletes, when we identify ourselves with our sports, we also feel like, okay, if people see us as like these strong figures, then we ought to be strong, in all areas, not just physically. We should
together.
be emotionally and mentally very sturdy as well. And I think sometimes then that's what, for me, I think personally the challenge came in when I would struggle with some things, and then I would question myself and my ability as an athlete. If I was going through something that I found very challenging
Yeah,
and not what at that point in time, not what I thought was normal for a high performing athlete,
yeah,
did that mean I wasn't professional enough? Did that mean that I
mm,
did not have what it took to be better? Does that mean like I'm just not cut out to be an athlete? And I think all those questions, on top of like the existing pressure that I felt and I gave to myself to perform well, could be
yeah.
quite overwhelming at times, and yeah,
Yeah.
difficult to deal with.
Yeah, so I mean, it is really a lot because you have expectations for yourself for sure. I mean, any athlete, anyone actually will be able to identify with the kind of expectations you have for yourself. Then you have expectations from the family, the team, and then the nation. And then on top of that, you know that there is still vulnerability within yourself. And should I show that? Should I not show that? Should I seek help? Should I not seek help? How do you actually cope with all these stress, and did the way you cope change as you became older or how did it change?
Um, I think one thing that stayed very constant for me was that I am sort of like a closet. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to things I care about. So then I would like to make lists. So I think writing things down has always been a constant for me since I
Mm,
was young. Like I would, and I found recently that, I've become more aware that that's something that helps me a lot. I make lists. If I feel very overwhelmed, I feel
yeah,
like if I write things out, then if I have it on a piece of paper, one, there's a satisfaction of checking things off, and having that feeling of like, okay, one thing gone, like on to the next thing. And then it also frees up my mind to actually do the work instead of just worrying about all these like existing things that I'm dealing with.
yeah,
um, I have to admit, when I was a bit younger, I think I wasn't comfortable enough with myself. and trusting enough of the people around me to trust that I could be open with my struggles and that people would be accepting of that and of me. I felt that me opening up to my struggles meant weakness, and I think I tried to hide that a lot. Like I like to um go along again with that athlete, image, and just try and put on a strong front and not share that much. And I think that for me was a huge learning curve a few years back when I realized that there's some things that are just better or more easily um solved, or
Mm.
it's more easy to deal with such things if you have a good support system and people to share these burdens with, not
Mm.
just because some of them might be going through the same things, and you starting that conversation and opening that channel. You never know, it might allow someone else who's going through similar things to then feel comfortable enough to share with you too. But I think you'll be surprised, like people around you sometimes they care enough to be okay shouldering that burden or sharing that with you. I think a big thing for me was not wanting to place my issues on other people and thinking that
Yeah.
they would view me like, oh, Ting Wen's coming to talk to us. It's probably like something bad again, and like then I was afraid that
Yes.
people would avoid me or leave me. So I think
Yeah.
how I've evolved is just being better at sharing with people, being better at being more open, being more
Mm-hmm.
trusting with people who I know would be there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just finding a quality support system. So
Mm.
quality people, making sure like when I'm having a hard time, like I said, I make lists, right? Like, and one thing I found really works for me, and I like to share with people, is that if you're feeling really awful, really bad, think about the things that you can control and change right now. So for me, my immediate thing to go look at if I'm feeling terrible is, when was the last time I ate? Did I hydrate enough today? Uh,
Mm.
how has my sleep been, the last week? And this is for the women, right? Like, which
Yeah.
time of like my monthly cycle I'm in? Am I about to experience PMS, or is it like, am I about to get my period, and so like my body's just going through things? So I think,
Yeah.
like when you can kind of put things and separate things and understand where you are physically, then sometimes you might realize, like, okay, I haven't been sleeping that well, maybe that's why I feel so bad, and it's not like the world is ending, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I operate. Like sometimes I get a bit
Yeah.
over my head. I'm like, oh gosh, this is like the worst time of my life. And when I look back, sometimes I'm like, when I'm on my app, right? Oh, it's actually just like a really bad week of PMS. Like hormones were
Yeah.
probably like off the charts, and so making these lists, being aware of myself physically and also emotionally and mentally. I think um yeah, I think I've become better at being more aware and being comfortable enough to share these things with people, because then now I have, friends coming forward telling me like, wow, you're right. Like I've been so busy working, like I forgot to eat breakfast this morning, and that's probably why I feel so terrible. It's not, yeah, that bad.
I think that's interesting. So it's really being sensitive about yourself, right? Like to be a bit more aware about things rather than being overwhelmed by things that you cannot control, but be
Yes.
more aware of, why is it going on and what's going on with your life at this point that you can control. I think that's really insightful for me. It's something new that I should try to. Now, a little bit more personal, but I understand that sometime back in 2017, you were diagnosed with depression at the time. Could you share a little bit more about that? Was there a significant event that led to it, or how did you even find out that you might be having depression?
It's actually interesting. The person who kind of first tries to ease me into the idea that I, had clinical depression was my sports psychologist. I would go in to see her to talk about swimming, but then, after we got comfortable, after more than a few sessions, I realized that our sessions, uh, we talked more about my personal life, about things outside the pool than actually things in the pool. I think by that time, at the age of 25, 26, I kind of knew what I had to do in the pool to be a good swimmer, and I'm a hard worker, so like I didn't have any issues other than maybe like pre-race jitters and in figuring like the racing stuff out. Most of the time we talked about personal things, and I think it was her who first introduced the that to me, that perhaps I should um maybe look more into it because of how our conversations had been the last few sessions. And I think in 2017 there were a lot of changes going on in my personal life. I
Mm.
had been back from university. I've been back from the US for about a year and I think a year and a half maybe. There was a lot of adjustment coming back home after 4.5 years of being in school away from my parents, my family. That year, 2017, both my brother and sister left, one in January and one in August, to the US also. So again, more adjustments, right? Like I come back once we kind of like settle into having 5 people at home again. Then my brother leaves first, followed by my sister 7 months later. And I think there was a lot of like, along with the adjustment, I think it was just learning all over again how to communicate with my parents, who I think we were all having a hard time trying to figure out our relationships with one another, just because my parents hadn't, to be fair, they had not been with me for about 4 to 5 years in the US, and I had gone through a lot there. I had learned how to be very independent. I had managed a lot of things. I had struggled a lot through a lot of things by myself. One of which I think, I that kind of links back to um, wanting to be in control of things and hiding things, was that I had a bad relationship with food in college, which I then had to kind of get over by myself. And I think coming back as a 22-year-old and still being treated as a 16 or 17-year-old that my parents, that was the last time they kind of like lived with me, was very difficult for me. And then having my siblings not be there as an extra support system when they left in 2017, coupled with the fact that there were a lot of changes in my personal life. I was in my very first like uh, serious relationship ever. Swimming takes a lot of time. And when I was younger, I was always
Yeah.
reading. Also, my head was always in books, so I didn't discover boys like until after. So there was so many things going on, and I think just that adjustment and not being aware of
Sure.
myself, not really being very good at communicating with my parents, letting them know what I need, what I needed, what I wanted. I think it was a huge adjustment for everyone and a very big period of growth. um I don't know if there are any like older parents here on this talk today, but what my parents learned, I think, in the last few years is that as we get older, it's not so much parents telling us what to do anymore, but there's more like it's a two-way communication thing. And I
Yeah.
think my parents have gotten a lot better with growing alongside with us,
Yeah.
understanding that just because they have the role or title of parent doesn't mean they're always correct, or that I think we've just all learned to have a growth mindset together, and it's gotten a lot
It's a
better in the
learning
last.
curve. It's a learning curve, right? For everyone.
Yes. And so I
Yeah.
think there were times when I feel like I wasn't heard, I wasn't seen, I wasn't supported. And I feel like, and my parents, and our family, we are so close that I think when there was that disconnect in 2017, I just felt like I just felt so alone and so overwhelmed that I think I just kind of, in a way, I just kind of went off the deep end, and I just didn't know where to go, who to talk to, what to do.
Sure.
So my
Yeah.
site was
No,
very.
yeah, we really appreciate that vulnerable side of Ting Wen. We always see you confident and all that. It's really thanks for sharing this side of you. So, a question here is: as an experienced athlete like yourself, what have you learned about yourself, and how do you embrace such vulnerability, like what you just shared, and use it as strength?
What I have learned about myself, I've learned that there is strength in being open, in being vulnerable. Um, I've learned that I am capable of a lot, not just in the pool but outside. I've learned that through sharing um, my experiences and what I've learned along the way, I am able to help others. And I think in that process of helping others and realizing how much I enjoy that, in the last year or two, it's kind of given me some direction and some idea as to what I might want to do after I'm done swimming, which is great. Like yeah, I've just learned
Mm.
being more comfortable with myself and being more open and kind to myself allows me to give that better version of myself to people around me.
Yeah. Um, I'm interested to know what you would be doing after swimming. But I guess in closing up this, because we do have some questions that we want to address, could you leave us with some words of wisdom for people who are struggling with expectations, both of their own as well as expectations from other people?
Sorry, I was also looking at the questions. Can you repeat that really quickly?
Yeah, so just in closing, right? So can you leave us with some words of wisdom? You have been giving us a lot of things to think about, but like what would you say as, parting words of wisdom for those who are struggling with expectations both on their own and expectations from others as well?
I think a very, very huge thing that I've noticed with at least the younger generation is to stop comparing yourself to other people. Like, I know this also applies to people older, but with the digital age that we are living in, with social media being rampant, it's not like, people can be like, oh yeah, let's just turn off social media, not completely ignore the fact that it exists. It's fine that there's a way to coexist with
Yeah,
social media. I have a sister 8 years younger than me. She's 22. I would say she's like part of the TikTok generation. I'm very fortunate enough where I didn't have Instagram in university. I think like I'm lucky in that sense,
right,
because then I see how people compare.
right.
And to this, you are so stressed out with your life and what you want to achieve and your goals. Now, if you have all these things that you see on the side and you're constantly comparing yourself to like who does it better, like this is the life I want, or this is who I want to be, then you're not spending that time, that quality time on yourself and making, it's there's nothing wrong with wanting better, but it's
Yeah,
better for yourself instead of, either escapism into other people's lives, or worse, comparison, and then sometimes coming out of that comparison feeling bad about yourself. Now, if you talk about being motivated, saying like, wow, you want to be ambitious like someone else, you want to achieve great things, then sure, it's just how I think you coexist with,
yeah.
social media and how we use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a fine line. I find myself also, I'm thankful too that in university there wasn't Instagram. But now, even now at this age with Instagram, I do see myself spiraling sometimes. So I think you're exactly right. It's a lot about comparisons. So really can identify with that. Okay, thank you so much. We do have some time for some questions, and I think we've got some good questions over here. So one of the most upvoted question is, with so much expectations on your shoulders, literally and metaphorically, what goes through your mind during competition that helps to release the mental stress in your pursuit of excellence? So probably right in the games, right in the meet when you're swimming, how do you release that mental stress?
I actually really like this question because I've gotten it so many times, like over the course of my career, but I feel like right now I'm able to like answer it with so much confidence, and because I know myself so much better and myself as
Yeah,
a racer and a competitor. And I think it's all about, look, by the time I'm at the games, it's too late to do any extra training, any extra prep. Like, I'm in the moment. I can only control what I can control, right? So
yeah,
then at the games, like, how am I sleeping? How am I eating? How am I getting my recovery in? Am I prepared? Do I have all my equipment? And then talking about being prepared, like, if I am stressed, I take a step back, I look at all the work that I've done before, and that is a reminder of, my capability. Now then, if you are talking about a few months, weeks before the games, knowing myself, I get so into my head, like so in my head sometimes, and so stressed about doing well, that that's one of the things that motivates me during practice, like during training. Like, it's not just wanting to do well, it's also that fear of not feeling as prepared as I can be on the day
yeah,
of the race itself. And I
yeah,
think that preparedness kind of takes some of the mental like stress off of me. It takes away a bit of the pressure, and I think it helps me be a better trainer, because then, during practice, sometimes when I start getting complacent or comfortable, I just kind of like poke myself a little bit, like wake myself up and be like, what do I want to feel on the day of the race? Like, do I want to
yeah,
feel confident, like I've done everything I could, like to like coming to today? Or
yeah.
have the extra pressure of like, oh man, I could have, I should have,
I
like
could
I would
yeah.
have done. So removing all those like doubts, that extra that noise, that outside noise really helps during like the
Yeah.
on the day of the race itself. So being prepared, I guess.
I think it's a lot about what you can control and what you cannot control. And I think you really nailed it in really being able to psych yourself what are things that I can control at which point, and at which point it's like really out of my control. I've done truly what I could do to prep myself. And I think that takes a lot of practice on your own to be really, aware of yourself. So wow, okay, that's really insightful. Another question, I think because you were talking about your parents and how it's a learning curve, and all of us can relate because we all have parents who are obviously, also trying to learn how to manage us younger people. So this question from Pratima is, I'm a psychology student for the past 6 years, and I'm currently in the process to start my PhD, which then makes her almost like an expert in psychology. And therefore, when she shares that she's anxious or overwhelmed to her parents, they say, you're almost an expert. How can you not deal with them? What can she do to talk to her parents, or what have you experienced when you're talking to your parents?
I think, look, everyone's parents are different, right? Everyone's relationship with their parents are different. What I found that helps a little bit, even to start the conversation, sometimes you can't, the end result, this is what you want, right? You want them to basically be like, yes, I understand that you are going through a hard time, blah blah blah. But then maybe right now you are here, and it's like, how do you start that conversation so that eventually, because you're, congratulations again, on doing a PhD. That's amazing. It's going to take a few years, right? You can't just at the beginning of your PhD be like, parents, like, I'm going through this, I need you to understand, and you expect them to kind of meet you here. It's kind of like you kind of have to get there together, and it's a process, especially with, I think, older, some of the older generation, where they feel like because they're older and they've done more of it, at least my experience with my parents, they feel like they know better for us, or
Mhm.
they know more. um and while I agree that they have been through a lot of life and they have a lot of wisdom, they definitely can learn from their children, from the younger generation, from talking.
Yeah,
Again, it's about constantly growing, even at an older age. And I
yeah,
think it's about the tone, it's about how you approach that conversation, and kind of see, like, kind of being on their side and seeing like how it would be like to hear it from their child.
yeah,
And that's kind of how I've had to talk with my parents, over the last few years, and understand that I need to put myself in their shoes and kind of see where I'm coming from. I think
yeah.
tone is very important, because sometimes you can
Mm,
say things and it sounds perfectly logical and rational to you, but if you don't deliver in the right tone, say it,
yeah,
find it like do it at the right time when everyone's in a good mood, open for conversation. It's a lot about timing and tone. I feel like, it's like
yeah.
when you tell someone like, uh oh, I like you, but it's like the tone, right? It's like, I like you versus like, oh, I like you. So it's really, I realize it's really about tone with parents sometimes. If
Yes,
you
it
get
is.
too like intense about it, sometimes some people's reaction would be to get defensive, or
Yeah,
get into debate mode. So I think just being very gentle, and just kind of being like, look, I'm not asking you guys for help. I just, right now, I don't need you guys to teach me or tell me what to do. I kind of right now just need a listening ear. I kind of need you to
yeah,
just listen to what I have to say. And I trust you guys. I love you guys. Your support means a lot to me, and I just kind of need you to hear me out. I
yeah,
know that you guys care about me, and you guys probably have advice. Right now, for me, what I need is to just tell you my fears and have you hear them and be there for me. And hopefully at some point you guys can have a conversation about how just because you are an expert in psychology does not make you 100% like infallible to things in life.
yeah, yeah. No, perfect. That's true. It's all about how we communicate, right? Why aren't you listening to me? Versus, I wish you could hear me out. It's
Yes.
really a lot of. It's really different. Thank you so much, Ting Wen. We do have other questions, but unfortunately we are time, so we will have to end. But thank you for sharing and being an inspiration to all of us. I think it means a lot coming from you. We always see the confident Ting Wen, but we know a lot of work has been done, and I really love the self awareness that you have. Much to think about. So very very much grateful that you joined us today. We will be taking a pause now until about 3:15, but do come back after for yet another exciting discussion. One that I'm also looking forward to: Gen Z versus Millennials. We'll be seeking live opinion about from two Gen Zs and two Millennials on controversial topics like: do you agree or disagree that my career growth is a means to an end, not an achievement in itself? Much to think about. So thank you, Ting Wen. Looking forward to catch up with you more later on. But thank you for now. See y'all
Thank you,
later.
Cassandra. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.